Good day. Oh, golf course. Love golfing, baby. Love. All right, I suck at golf, like really bad. All right, here we go. But it's so much fun to do it anyways, because you know it's one of the few sports you can drink in. It's the best. All right, the Continuum Depot has two main areas of operation, apparently A and B. The most recent income statement shows Segment A has sales of $80,000 with a total variable cost of $45,000. Segment A has a total fixed cost of $40,000, of which $15,000 is avoidable. Segment B shows sales of $65,000 with a total variable cost of $25,000. Segment B has a total fixed cost of $32,000, of which $18,000 is avoidable. Okay, that's a lot of shit here. Since Segment A is showing a loss, they are considering closing the segment. Okay, pause for a second. They're considering closing a segment. When you read that, you go, okay, so I'm going to just, like, your brain has to compartmentalize and go, okay, I'm going to go to my rules that govern keep or eliminate a segment. Make sense? Keep or eliminate a segment. So, just to point that out, and hopefully you guys have that down by now. Remember, what do we do for keep or eliminate a segment? We do real contribution margin, look at incremental contribution margin, so on and so forth. So, doing so would allow them to expand Segment B and increase their sales by 40% without affecting the fixed costs. If Continuum decides to close down Segment A, net income would. Well, let's see. All right. Now, this is the problem with this example, is it's a what? Yeah, it's a stupid word problem, right? It's not giving it to me in a nice, normal fashion. So I have to construct this on my own. I have to realize that I have in front of me Segment A and Segment B. Now, the way we're used to seeing it is like we saw at the review, where typically they're laid out this way, where it's like, here's your sales, and here's your variable cost. So that's okay, though. We can do that real fast. It said in the question, let's make it look nice so we can digest it easier. Excuse me. They have sales of $80,000. Okay. Variable cost is $45,000. Now, what does this thing usually not show that we get anyways? Good, let's get the contribution margin. So $80,000 minus $45,000 gives us a contribution margin of $35,000, right? And so let's also get the avoidable fixed costs. That's all that matters, the avoidable fixed costs. So if it says here, the Segment A has a total fixed cost of $40,000, of which $15,000 is relevant. I'm sorry, $15,000 is avoidable, but of course it makes it relevant. Cool? So you got to be careful here. Yes, it does show a loss, because if you throw the avoidable and unavoidable fixed costs together and then subtract that from the contribution margin, you will see a negative number. In other words, it is losing money, but what we have to do is be careful to only look at the avoidable fixed costs. Okay? Now, for the sake of just, continuity, let's do it for B real fast. So their sales, it says, were $65,000 with a total variable cost of $25,000. Now, much as, again, it doesn't give it to us, we would need it anyway, so let's go ahead and get the contribution margin of $40,000. And then we only care about the what? Good. We only care about the avoidable fixed costs, okay? Avoidable fixed costs. So we only care about the $18,000. And actually, that won't even matter for this one, but just to make it look pretty, okay? Let me zoom in here for a second. Look good. Okay. So, we got that down? Great. All right. Now, what are we going to compute from this? Okay. Let's look at Segment A. Let's look at Segment A. What do you always calculate? Good. You calculate what I call the real contribution margin. Okay. It's not really a real term, but it's something I made up, and so I'm going to patent that shit. Real contribution margin is what? Good. It's the contribution margin minus the avoidable fixed costs. So that's $35,000 minus $15,000, which gives you a positive, be careful, $20,000. Let's pause here for 1 second, make sure you guys get this. With no other information, guys, with no other information, you would do what? Yeah, with no other information, you know that we would not close down A. You see, if it is a positive real contribution margin, it is helping, so don't close it, okay? But there is information on what we can do to expand B. So for B, let's take a look-see. Well, it says for B, what happens? Yeah, it says their sales will increase by 40%. Well, let's think about this logically. If their sales that are $65,000 now increase by 40%, will the variable cost increase by 40%? You betcha. And if that's the case, won't the contribution margin increase by 40%? Absolutely. So what's the trick, guys? The trick is you only mess with the contribution margin, right? That's going to increase by 40%. So if you take the $40,000, okay, take 40% of that, 40 times 0.4, that's an additional $16,000 on top, or it eventually becomes what? So you tack on again, they increase by 40%. 40% of $40,000 is $16,000, so $16,000 plus 40 the contribution margin for B jumps to $56,000. Do we all see that? Okay, good. But don't forget, for B, you have to do what? Get the incremental, oh shoot, incremental contribution margin. Guys, the incremental contribution margin. In other words, how much did the contribution margin go up by for B? Is what? Good. It made its way to $56,000, but it started at, $56,000 minus, it was already at $40,000. So the incremental contribution margin is what? Good. $16,000. You only get an additional $16,000 of contribution margin. So that's strange. In other words, A has a real contribution margin of $20,000. Okay? In and of itself, should you shut it down? The answer is no. Okay? If you shut it down, net income will decrease by $20,000. But if you look at the other information for what it tells us about B, we have to figure out the what? Incremental contribution margin, guys. Incremental contribution margin says the contribution margin goes up by 40%, or it goes 56 minus 40, it goes up by 16,000. So here's the question for you. If you shut down A, you will in fact lose $20,000. But will you lose $20,000 in order to gain 16? The answer is what? No, right? Does that make sense? If this number here was like 56 or whatever, $100,000, you would say, yeah, I'll go ahead and close that, lose 20,000, but again, in order to get my check for whatever, 100,000, but I'm not going to close down for 20,000 in order to get a check for 16. It's a bad idea. So in other words, net income will decrease by the difference, right? If we decide to close down segment A on its own, net income will absolutely decrease by $4,000, or it will decrease by the difference. Okay, so be careful there as far as how that goes. Don't forget, okay? Close down that segment on its own, it's positive, right? So it's helping, don't close it. But if you can close it and exchange it for something better, go ahead. But you're not going to close it and exchange it for something worse. All right? Good day? Good times? Good question. See you then. What then? See you soon is what I meant. There we go.